Welcome to Product as a Star. I am your host, Will Cunningham. And on this show, we talk to folks interested in getting the word out about a product, good, service, message, or even a call to action. Today's discussion will feature a conversation with Charyn Harris. Welcome to the show, Charyn.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Will.
All right. So, our first question, we'll roll right into this, is where are you based out of?
So I'm based out of Los Angeles, California. I'm originally from Mount Vernon, New York.
Okay. Money earning Mount Vernon. Okay. So did your did you take some education to lead you into where you're at? Because I noticed a lot of specialized skills, which we'll get into a little bit later on in the
Yes,
interview.
yes, yes, I did. My undergrad degree was from Berklee College of Music, and I was a piano major. And when you study music, it's really like a science. So that was my undergrad degree, and then I have a master's from the University of Phoenix. I have an MBA.
A master's. Wow. Okay. So now we're on the show today to talk about a book that you're promoting. But before we get into that, I wanted to know, are is writing your primary passion? Is that what you have always done, or did you just sort of one thing led to another, and then you found yourself with the pen?
I would say one thing led to another, but being a musician, being a songwriter, I just love writing. I love the creative process. It keeps me creative. It makes me think. I love telling stories and especially stories I think people need to hear and information that's important.
Right, right. I know that conveying messages in storytelling can be a very powerful vehicle. Do you have any other passions outside of writing? Because I'm curious to know what the other things were. We talked about music, and could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy music. I enjoy live music. I like cooking. I think anything where it has to do with creating, I really like. I've sometimes picked up a sewing machine and made things, and sometimes I do things just for fun. Music has been a big part of my life in the
Mhm.
music industry, and everything surrounding music has been a big part of my life. But I like, diversifying. I'm getting into crypto now. I'm getting into NFTs now. So I'm finding that to be equally as
Mhm.
interesting.
Right, right. So, to zigzag back a little bit, you talked about live performances. Did you have you ever performed? So, I take it you've performed live. I'm trying to find out. Do you sing? This is really what I want to know. Do you sing? In what capacity have you done? I'm trying to sniff it out.
Okay, so I wouldn't bill myself as a singer. I know how to sing, but I would not bill myself as a singer. But my expertise has been as a keyboardist, as a piano player.
Oh,
I started
interesting.
playing instruments when I was very young, when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was playing violin and flute and cello and guitar, and then I landed on piano and started taking piano lessons, and that continued. And that I was a piano major in college, and then when I finished, I came out and I started working as a keyboardist because at that point you couldn't just be a pianist, you had to be a multi keyboardist. So I learned how to, learning to work with synthesizers, learning to work with different types of keyboards as well. And then I started touring and started playing locally a lot in New York. I was playing with a lot of local bands in clubs from Harlem. I played at there's a very famous. It's not no longer there, but it was called the Cellar, which was a very important club to play at, especially if you were playing there. It's like you had arrived. And, a lot of the local clubs, some of the jazz clubs in New York as well, and started touring with local musicians in New York and then working my way around and eventually going to California and doing a lot of touring as well.
Wow. So, speaking of instruments and playing instruments, how do you feel about this statement? Because I'm going to make a statement that I don't think many people make. Instruments being a cathartic release, like the actual touching, the kinesthetic feel of expressing yourself, through these instruments. What do you think about a statement like that? Is it understated to say that the feeling of playing an instrument is something that may compel us to keep playing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's understated to say that. I think playing an instrument can be very complicated because you can do
Right.
it because of the feel you love. You get vibrations literally coming through your body. So it
Mhm.
can be very pleasing. It can be great to the ear. And I think that when you're playing an instrument, first and foremost, you have to do it for yourself because you're working on a multitude of intrinsic skills as well, and as well as hard skills, and you're working on your different senses. You're working on your touch, your feel, your hearing. So there's so many
Mhm.
things that are being developed when you're playing an instrument. So I think there's a lot of value to playing an instrument.
Right, and I would agree with that, even though I don't play one. I'd like to, well, not in any professional capacity. I like to, if I could get my hands on a keyboard or something, run my fingers across it, just, or a beat machine or something like that,
Mhm.
just to get the, like I said, the cathartic release of, onomatopoeia, boom, ping, pow, da da da. The cause and effect of it all is really interesting to me. Um,
Yeah.
so now I take it, now I get a sense that that you want to add value to the creative community. So how did you find yourself, discovering that there was a problem, or that you were skilled enough to bring a solution in the form of this book out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So, when I got out of school, when I graduated from school, I moved back to New York, moved home with my parents, and I had to figure out what to do. I had no one to guide me. I had no one to say, "This is who you need to meet.
Hmm.
This is what you need to have in terms of your assets. This is how you need to talk to them. This is how you need to present yourself. You need to have a budget. This is what you're going to need to do, in terms of putting a demo together. It's like, so I was learning these things. You would see people get deals, and you're like, well, how'd they get a deal? How did they meet so and so? So I started just kind of figuring out how to do it on my own, and eventually, and I was working a lot. I ended up working quite a bit, making just really great friendships with other musicians. Some musicians who were really, they were doing a lot more than I was. So sometimes they couldn't do a gig and they would say, hey, Charyn can do it. Or they would just refer me to things. So that was a really great way. It helped me, a lot with when I was touring with major artists from Barry White and the Cranberries, because I remember the management for the Cranberries at that time called me and someone had given them my number. So, creating the relationships, that was a skill that people don't really think about. They think that a lot of things happen through osmosis, and a lot of artists have been working very hard and planning very hard. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it to be successful at being an artist.
Sure, sure. Now, that's quite a diversity uh, in keyboard range, I might say. It fascinated, stopped me in my tracks. In fact, when you said that you segued from Barry White to the Cranberries. Now, that is a
Yeah.
fascinating. I got to know a little bit. First, how do you get on the stage with Barry, and then how do you get on the stage with the Cranberries? Zombie, I love that
I
song.
know, I
I'm
know, I
familiar
know.
with
That was really interesting. When I started working with Barry, I never played a note. I got the job without ever
it.
playing a note.
Wait a minute. Wait.
So
Stop. You wait. What?
I never auditioned.
What?
I never no.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
I mean,
Wow.
it was just kind of like he was meeting different musicians and someone said, "Okay, this is where you need to go." I'll never forget, it was the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and I go there and there's just a lot of musicians there. And then I put my name on the list. I was called up. I went up to his suite. There were a couple of people leading me into his suite, and then and he was there, and he was like this massive man in a silk smoking jacket and monogram shoes with this voice that just moved. It made the ground beneath you move. And
Wow.
he says, have a seat. And we just sat down and we talked for a little bit, maybe about 5 minutes.
Mm.
And then at the end of the conversation, he asked me my sign. And I told him it was Pisces. And he liked that because he had a daughter who was a Pisces. So I always felt that he kind
Okay.
of looked at me as one of his children, which was very, very sweet. Um, and
Mhm.
a couple of days, and he asked me if I had a passport. And I said, yeah. So then he says, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I left. And a few days later, I got a call and I got a package in the mail. And they were just like, okay, you can travel? I said, yeah. What's your address? And I was like, I gave them my address, and I had a package that came in the mail with charts and a cassette tape, because I don't think there were CDs really back then. We had cassette tapes.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that
Listen
wasn't
to
that
my
long
demo.
ago. That
Sure.
wasn't that long ago. That was like
Yeah.
1995. So that wasn't that long ago.
Right. So in other words, so in other words, it's still fresh in your mind.
It's very fresh because it was a major occurrence in my life. So I played with him from
Right.
95 till about 2001, pretty much to the end of his career. And somewhere around there, I got a phone call
Mm.
from the management for the Cranberries, and they asked me if I could come out to Ireland. It was a Thursday, and I said, well, how soon do you need me there?
Wow.
And they were like, well, we need you to leave like Saturday. So I packed my clothes. I told everybody, I was
Wait
like,
a minute.
going to
Hold on a
Ireland on
second.
Saturday. So I went to Ireland and just kind of hung out with them in the studio, worked some stuff out. And, I think I was there for maybe about 3, 4 weeks or something like that. And then came back to the States. They weren't quite ready to tour yet, but came back to the States. But it was just so much fun getting to, hang out with them and getting to know them.
Wow. I'll tell you what, this room over here just got a lot chillier because you mentioned the Barry White story and I got the chills. And then the cranberry story, I'm like, whoa, and I'm glad that you're on the show because you are some impressive dynamo. I mean, just look
Thank
at what
you.
you've done. I mean, you're going from here to there, from there, and not on a small level, might I add. I mean, I feel like more people should know about who you are. I'm also in Hollywood too, so hopefully I'll be able to get more information and we can meet up and I can learn a lot more from the ins and outs because I'm new in the industry and everything and I have my own value proposition, my own value add that I bring. But wow, fascinating. So now that kind of brings us to like a question that I want to know as far as that I want to share with my audience because my audience is one that likes to learn and they like to rewind stuff and get jewels out of it. So how do you find yourself keeping track of everything?
Wow, that's a really good question. I just kind of take everything one day at a time, and I've had a lot of great experiences, and it took me a while, I think, to put two and two together.
Mhm.
So I was actually thinking how I would like to just sit down and write out every little thing that has happened over my life, all the places that I've been, all the people that I've been able to see or be in front of, or moments I've been able to experience, because there were a lot of really interesting moments that later I found out were kind of historical, not hysterical, but historical. I was going to say some of them were hysterical too, but
Like,
but there were a few things that when I would Google them and I would go, oh my gosh, I was there when that happened, and I think it's important to do that. I mean, this is something I never really kind of set out to do intentionally, but it's just kind of been my path that I run into all these people. And it took me a while to put two and two together and figure out, why do I run into all these people? Why am I having these experiences? And how can other people benefit from them? So I've been, really intentionally now looking at some people that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of people. I taught piano for many years, and
mhm.
among my students were Eddie F. from Heavy D and the Boys, and Bryce Vine,
Wow.
who is now an artist, and I taught Eddie Murphy's kids for many years too. So
Wait, you talking? Okay, you're moving around. You have a lot. You have quite the resume. Well, I'm just really, really shocked to hear you say that. Eddie Murphy's kids. That's not no easy. In other words, that circle of trust, you have to be vetted and trusted
That's a
and
huge circle
relied
of trust.
upon before you.
Hmm.
Right. And so for you to be in that circle, it really is a testament to your background. And it's important for me to establish that for our audience as we start to go into talking about your book, because a lot of people might drop a book. A lot of people might have these ambitions. And, nowadays with the ability to publish being so easy, we get a lot of pseudo stuff out of it, out of this market. But here we have you coming from circles of trust that have been vetted, and now you're ready to impart this wisdom with our audience, which brings me kind of to this other question, which is, what is a resource that you just can't live without?
Wow. Um, now it's like the internet. I can't live without it. I it's
Right,
it's
right.
like the black hole for me because I learned so much, and and there's just so much information. I mean, when I grew up, there were just I went to the library almost every day after school. I was at the
Mhm.
library. I There was a bookmobile, so books were very important to me, and now I can find my information digitally. And I really, really
Yeah.
like that. I really like that if there's something I want to know, I can dive into it and I can find it. I can find it peer reviewed if I need to. So that, kind of makes it valid. It gives the validity of whatever I'm looking for. So I really like that I can have access to the internet.
Wow, wow. Um, uh, More on the circle of trust, getting back to that, how do you think your peers see you?
um, I think they see me as giving. They think I'm really
Hmm.
smart too. Um, I mean, which is it's very flattering. I actually ran into somebody yesterday I hadn't seen maybe in a very long time, and he just has so many very nice things to say about his memories of us growing up as young musicians, just moving to LA. And he was like, you're the first person that did this for me, the first person that did that for me. And that's really nice because sometimes you do things and you forget that you do things, but people won't forget. I mean, they'll what is it? They'll forget the things that you say, but they won't
What you
forget
say,
how you make them
but they
feel.
won't forget how you make them feel.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
So you might forget what yeah, but they'll remember if you do something. I think acts of kindness go a really long way. And for me, I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. Mount Vernon is a small town. It's 4 by 4 square miles. We have very small town values. I'm still very close with a friend of mine I've known since I was 2 years old. My friends from 2 and 3 years old, and I really take a lot
Wow.
of pride in that. And I take a lot of pride in the way that I was raised and the community I was raised in, and the way that we saw the world, the way that we saw each other. We weren't raised with a lot of tension. We weren't raised with a lot of racism. It was a very diverse community. My neighbors were Italian and Irish and Jewish, and um, you know, my family is multicultural, and so we weren't raised with these fears that people have now.
Right. And that fear can paralyze you. It can paralyze one when you have these concepts that make you terrified, and
Yeah,
it can really restrict mobility. So courage becomes really huge. And when we hear a lot of women in our society say, have I feel bold, I feel courageous. And a lot of on our side of the spectrum, men, we don't understand what that means, but really
right.
it does take a lot of courage to stand on your truth and to elevate yourself, because there's so many insecurities swirling around, and insecurities in the form of uncertainty is what I
Yeah,
mean. And so
yeah,
when it's uncertain, these resources and people and support units become viable, life lessons become viable, and then of course developing a belief in yourself, and for me a higher power as well. So I'm glad that you're sharing this with us. Now, I did miss a question. I have to double back, because I forgot to ask you, how do you see yourself?
how do I see myself? That's a really good question. um I mean, I do see myself as kind. Um, I see myself as thoughtful. I see myself as intentional. Um, and I see myself as someone who takes it just one step at a time. I mean, life has ups and downs. I think we certainly have all had them, but I believe that I've become an expert at riding the wave. I see myself as very brave, very courageous. I'm very protective of myself. Um, I'm from New York, so I'm not a punk. So,
All right, good to know.
I could be pretty tough. I could be pretty intimidating. I've scared a lot of guys, especially in the music world. I think I've made a couple of guys cry. Male musicians cry. I could be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah. Wow. Was it feedback? Was it criticism? Was it,
It
or
was.
was it, this is terrible?
I would say it was feedback, and it was the truth. And I'm very, because the thing is, if
Oh.
you don't, if there's a difference between criticism to me and feedback. And I'm glad that we're talking about
Mm,
this, because for me, criticism comes from a place where somebody really doesn't know what they're talking about. They haven't walked in your shoes. But feedback to me is
okay.
something that you have to consider the source. And if I've been there, if I'm telling you to do something, I'm telling you from experience, because I've been there and I've experienced it, and I'm giving you something that's going to help enhance you. So, there are a lot of people, a lot of musicians have egos. A lot of them just think the world revolves around them, and a lot of them are all wrong. And they just need to be up on their game. You can
Right.
never be, you're never 100%. There's always something that you can work on. I don't care what level. I was in an interview once, and I said to somebody, I was talking about Luther Vandross's vocal coach, and they were like, "Wait, hold up. Luther had a vocal coach?" I said, "Yeah, professionals have to have
Yeah.
coaches. It's critical. It's critical, because you have to keep your instrument in tune, and you might not go to that coach every week. Maybe it's once a month or whenever, but you want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you're doing things as you should, because you can't sing or perform and listen to yourself a lot of times at the same time. You need someone on the outside to say, okay,
That's right.
try this, because it's going to enhance what you do. Be open to doing it. I mean, even for me as a writer, the first piece that I wrote in grad school, my professor tore it to shreds. I thought I did. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, your paper is so great." He tore it to shreds, because he's like, "This is just flowery BS," and he was right. He was absolutely right. And I considered the source, and he's like, "Look, this is what, if you want people to take you seriously, you have to listen." So you have to
Mm-hmm.
listen, you have to
You have to
follow
listen.
through. If you want people to really take you seriously, if you want to be considered as an expert in your field, if you want to be truly respected, it's not just playing. Anybody could just sit
Mm-hmm.
down and play a song on the piano, but do you know the science behind everything?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have proper technique? I mean, it's more than just playing a song if you're really going to be a musician.
Right. Wow. 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 So now you said that I like the applied sciences wing. I love it, where you have to turn information into the doing, right? Because you can have so much analysis by paralysis, almost, type of a thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but before we get into the proven strategies, which is what I love about your book, because it puts us right in the doing, right? Before we do that, I had one final question for the author before we get into the super mentor. And you have master class written all over you, by the way. I hope you teach when I go. Um, but is there like as an author, is there like a favorite weather condition or a season that makes you more extra creative? I know for me, it's like the rain. Whenever I hear rain, hitting on the top of the building, or in cars
Yeah.
swishing through that, I'm like, ooh, ooh, something is arising. Now let me get my pen out. Do you have anything like
Yeah, I
any
like,
season?
you know what? Yeah, I like the rain. I like working in the rain. I like working in the cooler weather, but for me
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's for me it's a matter of time. Um But but this is a nice time of the year for me to just sit down and do something. Like I know it's going to rain here in California over the next 2 days, and I'm kind of excited about it. But
Hmm.
I like to work when I'm traveling. So I like to work on a plane
Ah,
because I know if I'm on a plane for at least 5 hours, I can't go anywhere. I
right.
there's nothing that's going to distract me. So I
Wow.
don't have to I don't have to take I have a daughter, I don't have to take her anywhere. I don't have to, feed the cat. I don't have to answer the door. I don't have to do anything. I can just sit there and work. So that's one of my favorite times to work, especially if I have a very long flight, because then I can also kind of check through things. I can look at, okay, because it's not only having my book, but I have different products and downloads and what else do I need? And I just have some dedicated time that I can really think. But I'm really excited about the rain that's coming in over the next couple of days.
I write a lot of rap music and sometimes off-key rock songs. And so, like when I sometimes it's a mood, right, that comes from the weather, or
Right.
it's the way that the coffee hit me that day, and I'm like, ooh, okay, we got the weather. It's cold. I might have to bundle up a little bit to escape the cold, and then the
Feel,
artist,
yeah.
and then I'm ready to go. Now, next question is getting closer into the book about the art of war. I saw that you are a part that there was a part that was written and it said these are the proven strategies, guys. This is not some you want to have this book open as you move through life, it almost seems like.
Yeah, we
So could you
do.
talk to us a little bit about that? Because you do have the qualifications. Talk to us about
Yeah,
this book
thank
you
you.
got.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean when I look at Proven, and here's the book right here is a physical copy
Okay.
that I don't see if they can see that, but this is
Yeah.
the first run. I just ordered a second run of copies, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, so I think that there are some things that are just really important that creatives don't think about, because we love to create
Mhm.
music and we love the way it makes us feel, and we love it when somebody compliments us on our music. So there's a little bit of narcissism going on when you're creative, and it's totally fine. It's
Sure.
okay. But then there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that can happen, and a little fear of, well, what if somebody
Right.
rejects it? So it's like, if they reject it, then they're rejecting me. So trying to get under
Mm.
creatives to understand that it's almost like, it's like you're making a creation. It's like, you're having a baby, and you have the baby, and your baby grows up and gets out the house, and you want your baby to get out the house because that gives you more freedom. So, I think of
Right.
it almost like that. Or, just thinking about, okay, here I am, I'm writing this stuff. Well, what do I do with it? Well, have you created a budget? Do you have a plan around it? Do you know who to meet? Do you have a pitch? What if you walk into a room and David Foster or Quincy Jones or any top producer is there, and you're like, that's who I want to work with?
Mm.
What are you going to say to them? And like for me, I had a lot of anxiety growing up, especially when I finished school, because part of it was I wasn't as clear with what I wanted to do. So I had to kind of learn how to shape what I wanted to do and practice it over and over again. And a lot of it is just practicing. A lot
Hmm.
of it is role playing over and over again to figure out, how can I say this? And then also when you look at the intent behind what you want to do, the energy you're putting into it, how committed are you to it, and are you doing it for the right reasons? So when I hear creative go, I should be
Mm.
up on that stage, I should be a star, I should do this, I should be this and that, and I can do what they're doing. But if you haven't put what you're supposed to into what you're doing, you have to look at that, and you also have to consider what's going on in your life. You may not live in a main
Hmm.
city that has access to the industry, but you know what, no matter where we are, you
Right.
don't have to stay wherever you are now. You can always move someplace. So I talk about a lot of these things that people don't think about. They don't think about their community, or how they're viewed in their community, because that can impact you as well. So it's much deeper than being an
Right.
artist, but really getting into the mindset, looking into your family values. So you might have family values that prevent you or have prevented you from shining and being who you are born to be. So how can you tap into that? How can you start listening to yourself?
That is fascinating. You might have a family dynamic or conditioning that is preventing you from being, your next level. So how do you get out of that thinking? That's a, that gets us into reframing and re-education. You know what I mean? And how do you find yourself getting a hold of some of these traumatic events, and then so that we may conquer them? And for me, in my personal journey, reframing has been the sure way to get a hold of some of these situations, which is just to say, hey, don't take that personal, whatever this thing
Yeah.
happened. And even though it may not be your fault, it may be your fault, but it is my responsibility to get rid of the thing, because for all I know, I'm the only one keeping it active. So I
Exactly.
love right. So
Yeah.
I'm a super fan of what you said right there. And remember, as we recall your earlier in this interview, you telling us about your background, we see that specialized knowledge is taking the form of this book and in this opportunity. And if I'm not mistaken, it was $13, $11 from what I saw. I went ahead and snatched it up because knowledge is power, and and the specific knowledge is the doing, and that's what I'm a super fan of. Which brings me to, I thought I saw something on Facebook about a Facebook group that you were doing, how to
Yes.
10x. Could you
Yeah,
talk
I
about
have.
that a little bit? That's
Well, it's
fascinating.
yeah, it's actually we've changed the name to Musician's Guide to Grit. So it's now the
Oh, wow.
musician's
Okay.
guide, yeah, musician's guide to grit, because I really thought about, it's not just 10xing your creative career and your creative quotient, but that is something that's really important. And we'll talk a little bit about creative quotient. But I find that there are a couple of elements that I think really set people apart, and it is your amount of grit and resilience. And of course, there is that amazing book, Grit by Angela Ducksworth, which is really, really good. But I find that even as a creative grit is so important, because, or creative resilience. How willing are you to kind of get in and learn things that you may not need, but you need to know? Like, there are things that I
Mm,
know about the music industry and things that I know about being a musician that I hadn't used every day. So for instance, I took acoustics, I took audio recording, and one of my jobs out of college, well, out of actually one of my jobs when I first moved to Los Angeles was teaching MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, because MIDI was
yeah,
something that
sure.
was really important back then. And this was before, I think, Cakewalk had maybe just come out. There was no Pro Tools, there was no Logic Audio. A lot of these programs didn't exist back then, but MIDI was the way, and MIDI, it was in, out, and you had to understand the routing of the cables. And I had to teach the routing of the cables, and it was just really, just really understanding the concepts behind it, and what was happening. So, but I don't use that every day. I wasn't using that every day. I hadn't used it in 25 years. Fast forward now, my role as a
Hmm.
tour manager, sometimes I have to advance shows. So I have to understand, I have to know what it is in terms of different speakers and microphones and the different equipment that's needed. But because of my experience as, from early on in college, my experience as a touring musician, working with tour managers then, and for me now working in management and as a tour manager, I can speak tech talk without a glitch.
It's fascinating what you're saying. I'm a tech guy myself. I have my own software company, Agua Technology. It's what I do for my livelihood, and we issued a cryptocurrency to power it. So, but in doing that, I had to research a lot, right? Because I didn't go to Yale or
Yeah,
Harvard
yeah,
or
you've
anything, so I
had
had
to
to get
do,
on my
yeah.
research, right? Right. So I ran across a guy named Chris Saka, and he was saying something very interesting that I realized, whoa, this puts me in a really good position. And what he said was kind of what you're touching on, of doing things that kind of don't scale, but they can make you dangerous in the long run. So, for example, I worked for a radio station,
Mhm.
shout out KBBF in Santa Rosa, California. And it was a radio station where I didn't get paid anything, but I had to volunteer to be there. So we talk about resiliency and grit. So I had to be there, you know, to learn this, to follow this idea that I had about being on the radio and just getting that experience. And so I had to show up all the time, continuously. But what I did was I learned everything about the radio, everything in radio station, from how to, you know, program, how to load everything, why dead air is a no-go, all these different kind of things that would have taken me probably, you know, I would have had to go to school for years. And I probably would have had to, you know, if I would have went to a commercial radio station, I would have probably taken 10 years, you know, to move up, you know, in any strategic way. Here, I was able to get all of that within a very short time, learn how to run the whole thing, and then, you know, go about my way. And that led to me having, doing something that didn't scale, but yet, man, it's helped me in spades. I mean, here it is, we're doing a media product right now, and my technology is centered in entertainment as well. So these things serve as
valuable.
foreshadowing maybe for your future, and it's very, very valuable. This has been a great interview. I feel like you know, I would love to have you back on again, and I want to learn so much more about you as a tour manager, because that's new that I didn't even realize. You know, wow, tour manager, man, it's gonna be hard to keep up with you.
I do day-to-day and tour management for Macy Gray. So that keeps me very busy.
Wait a second. Do you need some security? Throw me a security shirt. Let me lift a speaker or something. I'm going to try to, you know.
It's amazing. It's so much fun, and she's lovely to work with, and just fascinating because she's so iconic.
Right. So. That voice is one of a kind.
It really is.
Yeah. As we find ourselves winding this down, could you share with us maybe what was your biggest failure and how you bounced back from it?
Oh boy, my biggest failure. I was let me see. I think I was living in New York, and there were a bunch of auditions, and I was going on auditions, and I went on an audition with a band, and they offered me the job, and it would have been probably my first major tour, and it would have been a game changer for me. But I thought that I was going to do another job. So I said, oh, I can't take this because I'm going to do blah, 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 blah. Because, you know, so-and-so is my friend and they're going to hook me up. And I ended up not working with that other band, you know, and I wasn't even in the running for it. So then I went back to the first band. I said, hey, I'm available. And they're like, well, you turned us down, so we gave it to somebody else. Oh. And that taught me a big lesson. A bird in a hand is worth two in a bush. You know, it taught me a really, really big lesson on how to be a little clearer and not just think, you know, and that was kind of about my naivete at that point, where I was like, well, so-and-so is my friend and I'm going to go out with them and, you know, on the road, and we're going to, you know, I mean, we're buddies, so we're going to be on the road together. And that wasn't the case. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So you learned from that to, you know, to take that for sure shot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world, you know, it certainly wasn't the end of the world. And I mean, the band ended up doing okay, and they had a pretty big career for a little bit, and, you know, they fizzled out eventually, but they did their thing when they did their thing. And then we all have our path. And that's the other thing that I think is important. Everybody's not meant to be out front. Everybody's not going to be a star. But for me, it's really been about how can I do what I want to do in the wheelhouse that I want to do it, and how can I have quality of life? So quality of life is something that, you know, I really look at.
Yeah. Okay. Now see, okay. I'll take it back. One last question. Okay. I know that last one was supposed to be the last one, but this one, I wanted to know, where do you see yourself in 10 years in a professional capacity, whether it be retired, whether it be still going strong, whether it be whatever? I would like to know how you see, like, if you can paint yourself 10 years from now, the perfect ideal situation, what would that be?
So my perfect ideal situation is I have about at least three more books that I want to write. And I'm not going to wait 10
Oh,
years to do them. I'm planning to write them within the next two
that's
to
right.
3 years because it takes a moment. I could probably crank out, one book I know is going to take me about a year, but the other books might take me about 2 years. I mean, I can do them within a year span, actually. I can do two within a year, actually. So yeah, so the next 2 to 3 years, I think I'm going to do a lot more writing. I'd like to do a lot more speaking. I'm thinking about, maybe I'd like to be a host on TV or radio. I do have a podcast coming up on Sirius
Mm,
XM that I'm really excited about, called the Charyn Harris Experience. So that will be coming
wow.
out in 2022. So I look at, just being more of a personality, doing more adjunct professor work, or doing adjunct professor work, I should say,
Mm.
speaking more, speaking as an expert more, working with more creatives. And that's how I would like to, just kind of build up creatives in the world. And I think that I look at that as my
Mm.
retirement plan.
To do more work.
More work, yeah. But
It's a
but
lot of
at
drive and
a
ambition.
different pace,
Yeah.
at a different pace, because I'd like to work, I like to
Mm.
go all over the world. I like to travel more, and I like to be a little bit more leisurely.
Yeah, traveling all over the world. How was that like your first trip going out of the state? What was that like
Oh
for
my
you?
gosh, my first trip out of the country was it was amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been traveling for a really long time. My parents we used to travel when I was a kid,
Okay.
and we would just mainly go to the islands. And then I
Okay.
think when I was a teenager, I took my first trip out of the country, for, yeah, I think that, or like transatlantic trip, I should say, which was to Africa. That was like a really big trip.
Hmm.
But for us, being in New York,
Wow.
we would go to the Caribbean a lot. Puerto Rico and Bahamas, Jamaica. That was just normal because we would go there on the weekend because tickets were cheap back then. You could just
Yeah.
hop down for a weekend. But yeah, but eventually, when I was a little older, my mom took me to Senegal, and that was just like mind blowing. And then I was like, oh, I just want to travel more. And I
Oh my
started
God.
traveling, and then I just kind of, it's like the light bulb went off. It's like ding, 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 ding. As a musician, I could travel. So I've gotten to go all over the world now. I mean, there aren't many places I haven't been, and it's really enjoyable. I'd like to do some traveling when I'm not working, so I could
Hmm.
actually go sightseeing and maybe spend a little more time and become a little more ingrained in the culture of some
Mm.
places.
Wow, man. I mean, I consider myself to be an empathetic person, an empath, if you will. So you're at that gate in the airport going to Senegalese. Like, what is going through your feel? Like, how long of a flight are you looking at? What are you? I mean, man, you said it's a big trip because you'd already been out of the state. You'd already been. I mean, you'd already been to the Bahamas, but this is a different trip. You're going to,
Right.
Africa. This is. Was there spiritual implications? Were you thinking, "Dang, I'm going back"? Or was there what? I mean, I, I'm trying to be at that gate
Yeah.
right now to feel what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of like, I knew, I mean, I was like maybe about 19, so I was pretty young. And there was no internet, there was no ancestry.com, but you knew that you were going to Africa. You knew that, that was part of your cultural story. And I didn't know what to expect. But when I got there, I was like, oh my God, this is so incredibly beautiful. The people were great. There was this one guy from Baltimore who tried to recruit me and a friend of mine, because there was another girl my age there. He's like, you guys should stay here and become my wives. I moved here because I could have many wives. And I was like,
Yeah, both of
but
y'all should
dude,
be with me
you're
forever.
from the States. That was kind of funny. That was like kind of funny. But the people, I made really good friends there, and kept in touch with them for many, many years. And some of them would come over to New York, and I get to see them. And and that was really very nice. I love being able to travel and meet people and stay in touch with them. And it's so much easier with Facebook and the internet now. And um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, it was just, I mean, it was very spiritual. It was extremely spiritual, and like, wow, this is where my people come from. It was a little sad to see some of the conditions, like when you get to the gate of no return, to see how small it was, how cramped it was, and to understand more about the conditions that people had to travel over. But I think what's fascinating, if you think of, you know, the transport, they got to this country, they got to other countries, and how they were able to sustain themselves and what they were able to fight for and what they were able to endure. And when I think about resilience and I think about grit, I think about my ancestors, and they've gone through much more than I will ever go through. So if they can go through that,
Yeah.
you know, I can go through what I need to and create the type of life I need to for myself, my family, and my legacy.
That is right. So thank you so much for coming on our program. Look what you did to us. You look what you gave us. We went from Mount Vernon, we went to the Bahamas, we went to to Senegal, and we went musical places with the Cranberries in Ireland and Barry White, and now ending in Los Angeles, here where you're at with this book and this opportunity. It really has been a pleasure, Mrs. Harris, and I hope that we can continue to hang out or talk, because I need all the help I can get on the back end with my software, and you seem to be a mega connector. So I really
Well,
enjoyed this, and thank you very much.
You know, it is the art of war for creatives. So there's the book again. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All righty now. Thank you, guys. And please come back on the show again. Product as a Star, Will Cunningham. Thank you, guys.